Hello and welcome to today's session. We are beginning to discuss a new play jointly written by Moss Hart and George Kaufman. You Can't Take It With You. It is a comedy which was released in the produced in the 1930s, yeah, and it was a huge success, a huge Broadway hit. It was also adapted into a movie later on. And this was one of those plays which responded to the depression of the 1930s, the Great Depression of the 1930s, in a slightly different way altogether. It has a comic take, and it is, it's a situational farce for most of it, and the plot also revolves around the many eccentric ways in which the characters respond to situations. And this, in some form, it's also a representation of how the American dream can also get manifested in many different ways, not necessarily in the definitions of success, which are predominantly accepted, but also in multiple ways which are individually very fulfilling too. So, as the title suggests, it's about, it's a very a poignant advice which says that you can't take it with you, at the end of it all. Yeah, it's about trying to underscore how money cannot buy you everything, and money and wealth and the success that you accumulate in this world are not things that you could take with you. So it's a very hilarious take on life, and it also gives us a number of lessons, a number of responses to the emerging capitalist, as responses to the capitalist economy, to the dominant definitions of success, and how, in certain individualistic ways, one could navigate through these challenges, and also the crisis of the economic crisis of the 1930s. So this was conceived as a play, a comedy in 3 acts, and we will try and take a quick look at some of the major characters. And this is actually more like the setting is mostly a home, in the home of Martin Van Dorf in New York, as the play also explicitly states. The play is predominantly set in the home of Martin van der Hoef in New York, and it is also, everything revolves around this family, the van der Hoef family. Martin van der Hoef being this the grand patriarch, the grandpa, the grandfather, who is around home. Much of the action also happens, and the entire family comes across as quite interesting in very eccentric ways. They all have their own takes on how to deal with life, and they all seem to be, despite these eccentricities, they all seem to be quite happy and very accommodating about each other. So we will meet them as when the play progresses. So Act 1 is set on a Wednesday evening, and you will find these very specific details giving a certain quotidian touch to this entire play. Wednesday evening, during this act, the curtain is lowered to denote the passing of several hours. Act 2 happens a week later, and Act 3 happens the next day. So this is, there's a very self-reflexive meta quality about this play that we will continue to notice. So these stage directions and these settings are also brought together in that form. So this is how the play begins. The Act 1, in Scene 1, the background is being described. The home of Martin van der Hoef, just round the corner from Columbia University, but don't go looking for it. The room we see is what we customarily described as a living room, but in this house, the term is something of an understatement. The every man for himself room would be more like it. For here, meals are eaten, plays are written, snakes collected, ballet steps practiced, xylophones played, printing presses operated. If there were room enough, there would probably be ice skating. In short, the brood presided over by Martin van der Hoef goes on about the business of living in the fullest sense of the word. From Grandpa van der Hoef down, they are individualists. This is a house where you do as you like and no questions asked. So the tone is already set for us right at the beginning in this in the description of this scene. And as I mentioned, there is a self-reflexive meta quality about it, even when the setting is being described, and there are these the details, the specific details are mentioned, but at the same time there are these semi warnings for the audience: don't go looking for it. So it's a real and fictional at the same time, and there is absolutely no effort being made to disguise those lines. So on the other hand, this blending of fiction with reality, and the consciousness of that, this is entirely fictional, that's being celebrated. So that meta quality accentuates the comedy, the situational comedy. In some cases it's also the situational farce that this play is about. So we get to know about the eccentric setting into which we are about to enter. So at the moment, Grandpa Vanderhoff's daughter, Mrs. Penelope Sycamore, is doing what she likes more than anything else in the world. She's writing a play, her 11th. Comfortably ensconced in what's affectionately known as Mother's Corner, she's pounding away on a typewriter perched precariously on a rickety card table. Also on the table is one of those plastic Paris skulls ordinarily used as an ashtray, but which serves Penelope as a candy jar. And because Penny likes companionship, there are two kittens on the table, busily lapping at her saucer of milk. And this is a woman, and Martin Vanderhoff is the head of the family, and there is Penelope Sycamore, who's in her early 50s, we get to know, and she also loves to write plays. It does not mention anywhere that she has managed to publish or she has managed to perform, produce any of her plays. She loves to write plays. So that is the beauty of this play. As we move on, as we read further, we will get to know there is no destination, there is no goal fixed for the acts in which they are engaged in. So as in the right at the outset, we get a sense of the kind of things where what happens over there. Meals are eaten, plays are written, snakes are collected. There's a that's one of Vanderhoff's hobbies. Ballet steps practiced, xylophones played, printing presses operated. There are also firecrackers, as we will soon come to know. So none of these things are being done with an intent towards making money or getting fame. They are doing it because they find it very fulfilling. Because it's also mentioned right at the outset, they are all very fiercely individualistic. So this is a play which gives a very different meaning to individualism altogether. They're all living life to the fullest, doing what they want to know, regardless of what that activity is going to fetch them. So it's in some form, it's a parody of the capitalist's so in some form, it is a parody of the capitalist system into which these characters, the play and the entire historical setting is steeped into. And this is also happening in the wake of, right after, almost during the economic crisis, the Great Depression. And it's also trying to respond to the situation in a hilarious way, in a farcical and sarcastic way, but nonetheless also trying to dig deeper into the problem, also trying to foreground that there are also other options, other ways of living your life in individualistic ways without necessarily going after fame or success. There are other ways in which individual happiness could be sought without necessarily doing the things which will fetch you what the capitalist economy, the capitalist setting foregrounds as foremost. So that's it. This play, in that sense, the celebration of that. It's deeply philosophical at some level when you get into the core of it. But at no point the play gets into a serious moment, as we will know. It retains the format of this farce, the situational comedy, and manages to convey this profound truth into this layered truth through these different characters and their exchanges. So then we find the next character entering, S.E. Carmichael, and she's 29. She's wearing ballet slippers. She wears them throughout the play. So that's the whole point of it. We do not come across any reference, any mention, or even any aspiration of S.E. Carmichael wanting to become a ballet dancer. So that is not, there's no destination. As I mentioned, the joy is in living every day to the fullest and just practicing and doing, playing xylophone and filling up the candy jars. Yeah. So the joy is in the moment, and that is something which is being endlessly celebrated throughout this play. And this is also a play we will find that it's pushing the limits of realism in very, very interesting ways. We get to know very, very minute details about what is happening at each specific scene, the responses of the characters and the things that they keep doing even while they are talking. So for instance, here, when Penelope Sycamore is typing, she is endlessly typing out different plays. So quite mechanically, she picks up one of the kittens, adds a sheet of paper to the pile underneath, and replaces the kitten. So there are these minute details depicted to us, in very realist terms, also showcasing some of the eccentricities that these characters are living with. So to give a sense of how they are, seriously invested in what they are doing in a slightly different way, let's take a quick look at this dialogue between Penny and Essie. Essie Carmichael is also Penny's eldest daughter. Yeah, I want to be a dancer. And Penny says, the only trouble with dancing is it takes so long. You've been studying such a long time. Essie, only 8 years, mother. After all, you've been writing plays for 8 years. We started about the same time, didn't we? But you shouldn't count my first 2 years because I was learning to type. So in the second scene, we will also get to know that Penny actually starts writing plays, not because she was into writing plays, because she had an ambition to write plays, because a typewriter was accidentally delivered to their apartment. So what begins with an accident, it then becomes her vocation, not necessarily a vocation which brings her fame or money, but something that she indulges in. She loves to indulge in on a daily basis. And there's a maid, Reba, a colored maid, and she is a black girl. This is how she's described, a very black girl, somewhere in the 30s. Then we get to know that each one's personal vocation is also of immense family interest. That's the stuff they talk about around the meal table. So Reba also asks her about whether she finished the second act. So everybody is interested in each other's life in such minute details about which act they are completing, what steps they are practicing, and about these nitty-gritties, as if they are also very, very life-changing and very, very important. So right after this, we find Paul Sycamore entering, who's a man in mid-50s. And there's also Mr. Deepena. Paul Sycamore is Penelope's husband. And there's also a family friend, Mr. Deepena. And both of them, they keep, they spend a lot of time in the cellar. They're also experimenting in manufacturing firecrackers over there. Again, not necessarily an activity which fetches them any sort of revenue. In fact, they have a very interesting response to the economic system itself, which we would very soon notice as well. So Penny, in between, she also tries to take tips from her family members about how to take the plot structure of her plays forward. And and she keeps asking, she's stuck in somewhere. One of her characters got stuck in a monastery, and that becomes a very real problem. And she keeps asking everyone about, if a girl entered a monastery, what would you do? And she is, she keeps asking suggestions and opinions from each family member to help her out with, this crisis, this writing block that she has got. And we also, meanwhile, we are introduced very briefly to this character, Miss Alice, who are supposed to join them for dinner. And this is Penny's second daughter. And this is where we get to know that the flippancy and the seriousness with which Penny is engaging with this act of writing plays, it happens simultaneously. So she's putting this play for a while, where a certain character is stuck in a monastery, and now she's going back to the war play. This is again very interesting. This is a 1930s play. This is after the First World War and before the Second World War. And this is also a time when, America as a nation, they are kind of fitting themselves in the world economy, in the world order, in the world politics. So there is a certain way in which the war situation also becomes interesting in a very fictional way. That is something we notice over here. There's a distance. There is a sort of a kind of a distance that this play as well as the characters are able to have from the situation of war, the reality of war. If one compares this with the kind of war plays or the kind of artistic output which was coming out after the First World War, we'll find that it was very radically different, say in Britain or in the rest of Europe. So here, this is being referred to in a very flippant way, which is also critiquing, which is also perhaps showing the kind of distance that America as a society has at this point of time, the 1930s, from these different historical events which had taken a toll on the rest of the world, almost the rest of the world. So when Reba also says, yeah, I always liked that one, the war plane, boom, boom. Yeah. So that's how they have this family response to war. Of course, it's not something offensive the way it is being presented. It is trying to showcase how in the 1930s, when this American family is talking about war, yeah, they're able to take a flippant tone, and that is being sarcastically presented, that is being showcased in order to show how the American responses to various events, historical events, are radically different from Britain or from the rest of the world. And so she also announces this to everyone, that how she is going back to her war play, and the different critical points, the crisis that she encountered in some of her other plays are also being referred to. Remember how you got out of that brothel. So just the same way, in this play also, she will be able to get that character out of the monastery. And it's at this point that the audience's attention are being drawn to, a snake solarium, a glass structure looking something like a goldfish aquarium, but containing, believe it or not, snakes. Another meta quality, another self-reflexive quality about this play, where the play is drawing attention to the kind of exaggerated, to the kind of eccentric things that the play is presenting. The snakes look hungry. Did Reba feed them? So the almost normal quotidian way in which the snakes are being referred to, yeah, this sets the tone further for this play. Yeah, here is a house full of eccentric people, where in an aquarium they are, instead of an aquarium, instead of goldfish, they have a snake solarium, where they have snakes as pets, and they ask each other about whether the snakes have been fed. So this is also representative in some form, and on a more serious note, this is also showcasing the a kind of individualism that American society is capable of accommodating. Yeah, it is sarcastic. It's borders on situational farce, but it is a critique as well as a comment on the limits of individualism. Yeah, and here it is. If you compare this play with some of the other important plays of the time, where the American dream is being critiqued in certain different ways, here we find that there are always, this play is actually opening up a number of choices in the wake of um, everything that could go wrong. Yeah. And in fact, it's an entirely different trajectory altogether. It's an entirely different political, socioeconomic, and cultural trajectory altogether that this play, just through one family, is opening up before us. So they do, have this brief conversation about how they have to feed the snakes before Grandpa gets home, and how he is fussy about the snakes. And the kittens also have names, Groucho and Harpo. And now Ed Carmichael, another character, he enters the scene. He's in the mid 30s, and Ed is Essie's husband. There's very little that he does in life except playing the xylophone. Again, none of them are professionally trained. Of course, they do try to take lessons, they do try to practice, but that's not their concern. They they dance ballets, and they play the xylophone because they want to. And of course, Penny writes plays because she wants to, not because they are aiming to become something or the other. Yeah. And Penny, in fact, comes across as this. There's also the time when the in American theater history, a number of plays are getting produced of different kinds. So there's also a sarcastic take on this mass production, where Penny is running through a pile of scripts: labor play, religious play, sex play. Yeah, so there are these different compartments into which these plays are being put. So these, the playwrights are also ridiculing this kind of mass production, and which is why this play continues to have this meta quality at so many levels. And Penny is still stuck in that question. We realize, about were you ever in a monastery? This loop-like quality about these characters is very interesting too. They are stuck in a certain time loop, sometimes much to their advantage, and this quality of being stuck does not bother them in any way. For instance, somewhere in elsewhere in the play, when one of the characters, in fact, only Alice and only Alice in this family comes across as the sane character. Yeah. So when she asks the others about time, yeah, they are clueless. Yeah. Somebody says it was perhaps 5 o'clock 2 hours back. Yeah. So this is the time frame in which they are leading their lives, and nothing seems to affect them. They are stuck in a time loop, and it sometimes has serious consequences, like paying taxes, or violating certain legal regulations. Yeah, but these are the things that do not seem to worry them at all. And another important thing is, in spite of this um, certain fancy detachment with which they seem to be living their life, they also seem to be quite interested, at least some of them. They seem to be interested in what is happening in certain other parts of the world. Yeah, for instance, we find Paul continuing to talk about Trotsky and the Russian Revolution. Yeah, and there are these intertextual references here and there where sometimes these works, the names of these works, are just placed there in order to accentuate the comic effect as well. And it also shows how historically and politically and culturally removed this family's reality is from any other things, any other world events, major or minor, that one of those times. So they do have some very, very serious discussions about things that do not affect them, things that do not matter, and things that do not affect their contemporaneous in any way. So now, halfway through first scene, we find the the uh, the main character, if one may call the grandpa, that he enters, and he is about 75. He's a wiry little man whom the years have treated kindly. His faith is youthful despite the lines that sear it. His eyes are very much alive. He's a man who made peace with the world long, long ago, and his whole attitude and manner are quietly persuasive of this. So this brief description is very important. And this is something which could be used as a reference point in order to identify each character, in order to highlight the characteristics of each character. They all have made peace with their worlds, and they seem to be okay in going along with it. So what comes, what stutters this narrative, we find that when anyone else from outside of that family comes in, there is obviously a conflict, because they haven't made peace with the world the way this Van der Hoff family has, seemed to have made it. So Van der Hoff has returned from after attending a commencement. We get to know that that's something that he likes to do. He loves to attend, these commencement ceremonies. And it was also mentioned right at the outset, if you recall, their house is almost right next to the Columbia University. So grandpa's home, they're preparing to have dinner. And there is a brief mention here about a letter which came for grandpa. And if you recall, there's absolutely no fuss about it. So Essie remembers that in the middle of her ballet practice, that there was a letter which came for grandpa. And this is a scene which will become, this is an instance which will very soon become extremely important. So they're all asking each other where the letter is, and they also remember, that the letter came from the United States government. Yeah, so they given the chaotic way in which they go about their lives, the letter seems to have got misplaced, and there's absolutely no fuss about it. There is no stress about recovering that lost letter. So this is, this is very important too, because when the playwrights, when these are because when we are being informed that here is a character, a set of characters who have made peace with their world a long time ago, they really mean that they made peace. A missing letter, even if it's from the government, it does not affect them in any way. It is just one among the other things which happens in this very chaotic, very lively household. So now we are introduced to this character, Alice Sycamore, who's about 22, and this is how she's been described. She's plainly grandpa's granddaughter, but there's something that sets her apart from the rest of the family. So she is Van der Hoff's granddaughter and Penny's second daughter. For one thing, she is in daily contact with the world. So look at the way in which Alice Sycamore is being described. So the rest of the family needs to be defined in accordance of what she is, because they are what she is not. For one thing, she is in daily contact with the world, which also signifies that the rest of the family, they are not in daily contact with the world. They're clueless of what is happening. Of course, it is one thing that, they talk about Trotsky and they discuss Russian Revolution, but they're clueless about what happens right outside their apartment. They are clueless of how things work in the American society. In addition, she seems to have escaped the tinge of mild insanity that pervades the rest of them. Yeah. So it's very clear the kind of things that separate Alice from the others. But she's a psychomo for all that, and her devotion and love for them are plainly apparent. At the moment, she's in a small nervous flutter, but she's doing her best to conceal it. Yeah. Alice is very different from the others. She's in touch with the real world outside. She has a real job, and she's also familiar with the socio-political and cultural realities, the economic realities of wherever she's living. So the others are just the others are living in some worlds that they have created for themselves. They have made peace with it, but Alice does not. That does not come across as a conflict between them. Their worlds are entirely different, but they also coexist. So we find that very soon we find that Alice is dating this her boss's son, and this is also evident in the way Alice is asking them about how things are in the family. I just like to brighten up the office once in a while. I'm known as the K. Francis of Kirby and Company. Well, what's new around here in the way of plays, snakes, ballet, dancing, or fireworks? Yeah, that I'll bet you've been down in that cellar all day. So this is the ordinary reality, the everyday reality that this family is experiencing, and Alice seems to be entirely okay with it, while she also holds this a job with Kirby and Company. And very soon we get to know that she's also dating the boss's son, and she is of course, and rightfully so, a bit hesitant to introduce the boss's son, Kirby, Tony Kirby, into the family, and tells the others, I want him to take you in easy doses, because she's entirely prepared of what is in store for an outsider when they come to the family for the first time. I want him to take you in easy doses. I've tried to prepare him a little, but don't make it any worse than you can help. Don't read him any plays, mother. Don't let a snake bite him, Grandpa, because I like him. And I wouldn't dance for him, Essie, because we are going to the Monte Carlo ballet tonight. So this is perhaps, she is trying to preempt certain things which perhaps have already happened when visitors from outside had come in. And so Grandpa responds to this by saying, can't do anything. Who's he? President of the United States? And to this sarcastic remark, Alice also tells who he is. He's Vice President of Kirby and Company, Mr. Anthony Kirby Jr. Yeah? So this is, Tony. Alice's and Tony's romance, and the way they negotiate with their lives is the central plot in this play. And it's, how the family moves around it, and they all make peace with each other despite the worlds that pull them apart. That is the crux of this, that's the central theme of this play as well. So she is, we find, the limits of the eccentricity, how this family is able to push the limits of their eccentricity. They are, they're beginning to plan their wedding too, about how we could have the wedding right in this room. So there's something very spontaneous and sweet about this family, which also might come across as extremely offensive and unpalatable to an outsider. So while they are waiting for Tony Kirby to show up, there's somebody else at the door, and this is a slight twist in the story, as we would notice now. And a certain Wilbur C. Henderson from Internal Revenue Department shows up, and he wants to have a discussion with Mr. Martin Vanderhoff about a matter of income tax. So this is an interesting discussion over here, where it is being revealed that Mr. Vanderhoff has never paid income tax. Yeah, and let's read through this discussion. So now we also get to know the missing letter and the other letter which came before that from the government, which no one was paying attention to, and the letters didn't mean anything to them. Those letters were actually about the income tax. According to our records, Mr. Vanderhoff, you never paid an income tax. That's right. Why not? I don't believe in it. Well, you own property, don't you? Yes, sir. And you receive a yearly income from it. I do, of between $3,000 and $4,000. So he's not, this is very evident, and Grandpa is not contesting that. Yeah. So it's a very interesting way in which he's responding to the notion of taxes. You've been receiving it for years. I have 1901 if you want the exact date. Well, the government is only concerned from 1914 on. That's when the income tax started. So we do get it, despite this farcical, flippant situations that these characters are stuck into. And we also get some historical sense of how things are changing. It's changed economic order into which Van der Hoef and the rest of the family are trying to fit in. So in some sense, we are also able to understand, we are also able to look at this family from a slightly different point of view when we are given this little piece of information. How they always had access. They were always, they come across as a very wealthy family who can fend for themselves. Maybe not the corporate kind like the Kirbys are, but the grandpa is clearly receiving enough income just to be able to take care of his entire family, and he's not hiding that fact, but he's also not willing to part with that just because the economic order changed. There is something very conservative here, and which is also very radical. Yeah? So this is the fine line which this play is trying to tread in so many ways. Here is a set of people who are conservative in many ways in refusing to comply with the standards set by the state, refusing to comply with the new economic order. But they are also very radical when they are trying to remain in that conservative mode. But because that conservative mode is not something that would fit in with the corporate, with the American dream, which also facilitates success and fame. So the government is only concerned from 1914 on. That's when the income tax started. Well, it seems Mr. Van der Hoef that he owed the government 24 years back income tax. Wait a minute, you can't go back that far. That's outlawed. What's your name? What difference does that make? Ever file an income tax? Yeah. So none of them have, file an income tax, and none of them care to do that either. And we get to know about the petty money that Ed is earning. So Mr. Van der Hoef, there's quite a penalty for not filing an income tax penalty. Suppose I pay you this money. So Grandpa has a set of questions to this representative from the state, from the income tax department. Suppose I pay you this money. Mind you, I don't say I'm going to pay it, but just for the sake of argument, what's the government going to do with it? How do you mean? Well, what do I get for my money? If I go into Macy's and buy something, there it is. I see it. Yeah? So this analogy is very interesting. When you are going to a store and paying money, you get something back. So when one is paying taxes, what does one get back? So this is a very, very deep question, which comes partly from Grandpa's eccentricity, but we also see the kind of social, political, and economic critique that this play is, trying to enact, within this very unusual situation, through this very unusual situation. So what's a government give me? So you need to keep in mind over and again that this is the 1930s. This is also society trying to deal with the economic depression. So there are these questions which are there in the minds of every ordinary citizen. And here it takes, the playwrights are conveniently using these characters who behave like, very eccentric outliers. And it makes it easier to make them ask such uncomfortable questions. It becomes easier for the playwrights to make a character like Van der Hoef not to pay taxes and to question the government. So we do see what the play is trying to do at so many levels over here. Government gives you everything. It protects you. What from? Well, invasion, foreigners that might come over here and take everything you've got. And the parody here is that it is England, unlike many other countries, America is not a country which was ever invaded. So this joke, this becomes a historic joke as well. About how America is getting taxes from its citizens in order to protect them from foreigners that might come over here and take everything. they've got. And this becomes a more of a historical parody. When we look back at it from the contemporary times, from where the contemporary world affairs stand. If you didn't pay an income tax, they would. How do you think the government keeps up the army and navy? Yeah, and this is a very hilarious response he gives. Last time we used battleships was in the Spanish-American War. What did we get out of it? Cuba. And we gave that back. I wouldn't mind paying it if it were something sensible. Yeah. So we find how the international affairs are being critiqued over here, how the policies are being critiqued over here. Again, these characters become convenient tools in articulating these uncomfortable questions, which otherwise, there would not be any forum to raise these things. Yeah, and the grandpa also makes this point that the constitution was paid for long ago. And interstate commerce, what is interstate commerce anyhow? Yeah, so he's trying to logically find his way. Henderson is trying to logically find his way through this argument, but then he realizes towards the end that it's pointless. So he uses his final weapon and says, "You will then go to jail." Yeah, if you don't pay it, you hear that that's a law, and if you think you're bigger than the law, you've got another thing coming. You know better than anybody else, and the sooner you get that through your head, the better. You'll hear from the United States government. That's all I can say. And the rest of the family is going about their business. Yeah, so one is playing xylophone, the other one is tending to the snakes, and there are also the firecracker sound from the cellar. So this government official, he's also at his wits end. My God, I never came across something like that. Yeah. So this is, in fact, the audience's response to this has been factored in, perhaps, to show the audience that there is this meta quality which is recurrent in this play. Even the audience have never come across anything like this before, perhaps. Yeah. So this man leaves his hat behind, which the grandpa also conveniently prefers to keep with him. And we're introduced to the next important character, Tony Kirby, who was not long out of Yale and even recently out of Cambridge. And he's an idealist. Look at his description. He is also not the typical American who's aspiring for fame and success. Although he has all the physical requirements of a boss's son, his face has something of the idealist in it. All in all, a very nice young man. So we are, the family gets to meet him, and we also find, some of Grandpa's responses to the kind of work that he does. It's very original. So they also they also don't know how to ask the politically correct questions. First, Deepan asks, "Wasn't I reading about your father in the newspaper the other day? Did he get indicted or something?" Hardly that. He just testified before the Securities Commission. So in some form, we find that they are in tune with what is happening. And here's a family who they're not scared to say the most uncomfortable things. There's absolutely no, you know, division, no compartmentalization in their minds between the kind of things which could be said out aloud and the things which should be hushed up. And this political incorrectness also makes this family more endearing, also makes this critique more humane and pertinent at the same time. So they're also asking some questions about whether he gets paid when he's working for his father. And Grandpa comes up with this thing. Sounds kind of dull to me. Wall Street. Do you like it? Yeah. And it is also, a very unconventional way to talk about some of the happening things in New York. Yeah, Wall Street being one of them during that time. And there's a very brief discussion about the commencement. Yeah. And the grandpa asks, "What's an English commencement like? Did you see any?" "Oh, very impressive. They are, huh?" Yeah. So he's certainly, not willing to buy that because he, in spite of the ways in which he is, refusing to pay the pay the income tax or refusing to comply with the legal standards within his country. He's certainly in awe of the commencement ceremonies which happen in America, and he's unwilling to accept, though he does not spell it out over here, he's unwilling to accept that the English commencements are also equally impressive. And we are used to, now we are introduced to a couple of other minor characters. Kolenkov, who's teaching ballet, is a Russian character. This Russian man is also teaching. He's a ballet teacher who visits the home, and he also fits in his own very eccentric ways. So the connection between this, the Russian connection, which keeps getting foregrounded in this place, very important, and the political aspects of it is something we will take a look at when we continue to discuss. And they continue to talk about Alice marrying Kirby, and how they will have the altar set up right where the snakes are. Yeah, so there is absolutely no difference in their mind about how political certain things are, how sacred certain ceremonies are. Yeah, everything coexists in this ideal world. And we also realize that at the end of everything, they're also happy in this world. There is a genuine pursuit of happiness in all of these things that they are doing. And with this, we come to the end of scene one, and we also wrap up the discussion for today. And I hope the scene one has given you a sense of how this play is, unfolding. And this, we may not be able to do a close reading of the rest of the play, but this close reading of the first scene was done to give you a hang of how different characters act, and how there is, even within the situational comedy, there are a lot of historical and political undertones, which in a close reading you might be able to access. So, with this, we bring this discussion to an end. And thank you for your time. And I look forward to seeing you in the next session, where we will continue discussing the play.